Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. And today I want to talk about shame. This is actually a topic that I've been reading about a lot, and I've been reflecting on it from the perspective of my own life, mostly. I think this is a very important and usually overlooked subject. So, shame. What I realized recently was that a lot of my behavior is conditioned by something that I don't really understand very well. Like sometimes the way I act, the way I talk, what I do, how I do it is motivated, is usually falls into a pattern. And until recently, I didn't know what was the common factor in that factor, but I think now I know. I think it's shame. Now, what is shame? Some people call it an emotion. Some shame is an emotion for some people. For other people, it's a set of beliefs. So I've heard both sets of definitions. But for simplicity, let's just call it an emotion. What is so? First of all, what is shame, and how is it different from guilt? So guilt is a very similar emotion, but yet uh, there are some subtle differences between these two, very important differences. So in fact, last year when I was going through some really turbulent times in my life, like internally, in terms of emotions, I thought that a lot of it was conditioned by guilt. I thought it was guilt until I spoke to someone, and that person told me that it's not guilt, it's actually shame. So, what's the difference? The difference is that guilt means you've done something wrong, and shame means you are wrong. So, there is something wrong with you. Okay, so guilt is based on a particular action or behavior, and it says that this action was wrong. I shouldn't have done it. Whereas shame is more toxic and more difficult to deal with because it says there's something wrong with me, not with my actions, but with me inherently, there is something wrong. So, why is it harder than guilt? Because guilt you can fix by changing your behavior, or you can apologize to a person whom you think you've acted wrongly against, and you can therefore fix this feeling, or at least somehow deal with the feeling of guilt. Whereas with shame, there's usually not much you can do, because what are you going to do if you are bad? There's something deeply wrong with you, with your essence, and that is exactly what shame is. So before we continue, I just want to show you a clip from one of my favorite TV shows, The Wire. And in this clip, there is a drug addict who is in recovery, and he goes with his friend to do an HIV test. So he's afraid to go alone. He asks his friend to come along, and then the friend tells him the result of the test. So let's watch this clip.
Good. Negative. Negative means...
You know what it means? You must be wrong.
It ain't wrong.
All the shit I done, all the works I shared. My best boy years back, I fight off the same hype as him dozens of times. He had the bug for sure. That shit ain't right no how, man.
You're disappointed. Shit, this ain't about the bug, is it? This is you trying to make the past be everything, mean everything. You don't even want to think about the here and now. Sorry, Bubs. Shame ain't worth as much as you think. Let it go.
Okay, so what happened there? You see, the friend announces or opens up the result and tells Bubbles, that's the name of the character, that he's tested negative, which means he hasn't got HIV. But notice the reaction of Bubbles. I mean, it's not usually, I mean, you think about it logically, you would think someone who hears that kind of news is going to be very happy, right? But instead, Bubbles is somehow disappointed. He's disappointed to find out that he doesn't have HIV. And there's then the very nice dialogue, very interesting dialogue ensues between these two guys. And his friend tells him that it's not about the bug, it's not about the HIV, it's about you don't want to let go of your past, you know? And that is exactly what shame does to us. So it makes our past very, very valuable, right? And it carries a lot of weight. So we are constantly carrying this weight of the past on our shoulders. Now, where does this come from? Where does it originate? Most likely in childhood, when either your parents or your someone in school, maybe you were bullied in school, said something bad about you or shamed you somehow. Like a very simple example, when a child, a toddler, let's say, pees in his pants because he can't control it yet, then sometimes some parents, what they do is they start shaming their child and they say, you know, are you not ashamed of this behavior? So this is just a simple example of how the parents send this message to a child that is, you know, there's something wrong with you. You should be ashamed of yourself. And this idea is very powerful. You know, it can embed itself very deeply in a child's psyche. So then a lot of other things happens, you know, maybe someone fails in a relationship, in a career, and it's like a snowball effect. So the first initial underlying message that there's something wrong with me, now there's a lot of other events that that correspond to the same message, right? That are in line with that message. Like, for example, if your relationship breaks down and your partner leaves you, well, what that does, if you have that deep down, you have that idea of there's something wrong with me, it immediately makes sense to you why your relationship broke down, and you start interpreting it as, you take it as evidence that there is something wrong with you, like a further reinforcement of the idea of there's something wrong with me, that's why he or she left me. You know, of course they left me. Why would anyone want to be with me? I'm unworthy. You know, I should be ashamed of myself. There's something wrong with me. So anyway, how does this translate to this dialogue? Well, like many drug addicts, the very reason why they become drug addicts is because they have that shame identity deeply embedded into them. So at some point in their life, it becomes too much and too painful. So they start numbing themselves using drugs or alcohol or sex or gambling. There are many, many different ways to numb oneself. And in this case, Bubbles was a heroin user, so he would inject heroin, and that's how he would escape from all this pain. And now he's sobered up, he's cleaned up, but of course, that shame identity hasn't gone away. You know, in fact, that shame identity is still trying to, it's still looking for evidence to justify its existence, right? And in this particular case, Bubbles subconsciously, or maybe even consciously, wanted to be diagnosed positive with HIV because that would confirm back to him his own core beliefs that, yeah, there is something unworthy about me. See, I am also sick now and I'm probably going to die soon, you know? So when he hears that he hasn't got HIV, which is good news, he finds it hard to reconcile that with his core belief that, you know, I've done so much shit, he says, in my life, and still I don't get HIV. That just doesn't make sense, you know? So he finds it hard to accept these positive news. And that's exactly what shame does to us. I know that from my own experience, again, I don't know what your experience is like, but the more I reflect on this issue of shame, the more I see that a lot of my behavior is actually similar to what Bubbles did there. Maybe in more subtle ways, but it's still very similar. In particular, sometimes there are situations when something good wants to come into my life, you know, that can either be a job opportunity, you know, a career-wise opportunity, or a relationship, maybe, a relationship that I want on some level. But when those opportunities come into my life, and I talked about this in one of my previous videos, it's like I begin to panic, you know, and I realize what's going on. I go in panic mode and I'm immediately go defensive, you know. It's like, no, I don't want that actually, you know. Why I don't want that is because probably at some point in my life, I was hurt in similar circumstances, and my body, as well as my mind, my subconscious mind, retained the memory of that negative event, and it tries to protect itself at all cost from me getting hurt again. That's why it goes in that panic mode. Right. So that's how shame works. Of course, it's a huge topic, and I'm gonna make another video about methods of dealing with shame. Something I've learned recently, this last summer. But for now, yeah, I just want to say that yeah, shame is a very toxic emotion. I think everyone has got it to a certain extent, and yeah, so we are afraid to get hurt, and that's why we are protecting ourselves. One way, I'm just gonna say now, one way of dealing with those emotions, because as we know, we can't fight emotions, you know. Emotions have their own logic, and it's not the same as our, you know, usual common sense type of logic. It's very different. And in fact, most of our problems arise because we are trying to fit the narrative of our emotions into our standard logic, and it doesn't work like that. So one way of dealing with these panic modes, let's say shame is triggered, right? You are afraid of something, or you think you are unworthy. One way of dealing with it is just understand in that moment that that's what's going on. That's what your subconscious is trying to do. It's trying to protect you, and try to be compassionate towards yourself, toward that part of you that is trying to protect you, And that is really key. I cannot emphasize this enough, how important it is to be empathetic and to be compassionate towards yourself in those moments specifically, because the whole reason why we have that shame is because we weren't shown enough compassion, you know, when that shame was programmed into us. Let's say when a parent told you that how, you know, you should be ashamed of yourself for wetting your bed or your pants. What that is, that's a classic case of a lack of compassion, you know. So instead of saying something like, oh, it's okay, you know, you can try again next time, you're just going into full, oh, you know, why did you do this, you're a bad boy kind of mode. And of course, that's lack of compassion. So what we have to do, how we need to work with that, is we need to sort of unwind that mechanism by giving ourselves the compassion that we didn't get back then, right? It's funny because people are usually quite good at being compassionate towards others, but they suck. They absolutely suck. And I know that in my own example, at being compassionate towards oneself. It's not easy at all, you know, because you constantly want to punish yourself for things that you've done, for things that you think you've done, for things that you haven't done. All of the little triggers that just are there for you to punish yourself. You take the stick and you beat yourself with it. Yeah. So that's compassion is key here. All right, so in one of the next videos, I'll talk about other ways or more methods of dealing with shame, and one of them will be mindfulness. I'll talk in more detail what mindfulness is and how it can help us to get out of that trap of shame, you know, that heavy cloud that hangs upon us. But until then, you take care. And if you like the video, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and I will talk to you all soon again.